Typically, if a student begins to have problems in a classroom, then the regular classroom teacher is going to recognize that, and hopefully that general education teacher is going to provide some modifications in the classroom to see if those modifications will actually alleviate the problem.
So tell me, what's going on?
Well, I'm concerned about a student of mine. His report card came out, and he's just not performing the way that I know he can.
Okay.
He's just he's not working up to his full potential.
And you were coming up with a number of different strategies to help him to be able to meet his goals. What were some of the things, that you've been using with him?
Right. We're doing the small group.
Okay.
We also have modified assignments. We have given him shortened assignments. We have given him a peer tutor, which is another student that works with him within the classroom.
Okay.
But we still don't see, the report card here just doesn't show that he's making any good progress.
Okay. So you've done at least 4 different strategies to try to
Right.
help him to be able to experience more success.
If those pre-referral actions don't help the child, then what we're going to do is we're going to formally refer the child for special ed services. The referral doesn't mean that the child will become a special ed child. It just means that we're going to formalize a process for looking at the child very closely, collecting some diagnostic information to see if we do think the child needs special education. So once we have the referral made, we're going to get a group of people together who have some knowledge and experience with this child to see if we can determine whether or not we think the child should be evaluated formally for special education eligibility.
Marva, can I call you Marva? As you know, there's been some concerns with Kevin and how he's been doing in the classroom and in the overall school environment. So we thought we'd come together as a team, talk about some interventions today, and go from there. Jason, would you care to start in terms of what your team's done so far to help Kevin out in the school setting?
If we do get to the referral committee meeting, then you're going to have a variety of individuals sitting around the table. The first thing you have to remember is you need to always invite the parent. Now, sometimes the parent wants to be there, sometimes the parent doesn't want to be there, but IDEA requires that you involve parents as much as the parent really wants to be involved. An administrator should be present, whether it's the principal, the special education supervisor, or an assistant principal, just so that the committee does have some administrative support. We want to make sure that the child's current general education classroom teacher is present. If there's someone there who can provide some assistance related to assessment data, maybe the school psychologist or diagnostician, speech-language pathologist, anyone really should be at that referral committee meeting who has some experience and knowledge with this student as well as some experience and knowledge with special education services.
Pat?
In my situation, I have students that are moving around all the time on there, and Kevin has a hard time completing the things that he starts. He starts off okay on our shop projects, but he just never quite gets around to finish them.
Well, the referral process is what gets the whole situation started to be taking a look at a student as far as possible special ed services. What I take a look at is, does the student's behavior or achievement or something like that fit outside the realms of what would be considered to be normal and age appropriate? If it does, then that's when we might be taking a look at what's causing that situation. I would usually go to a guidance counselor first and ask if they've had any conversations with any other teachers. And if they say, well, yeah, actually, a couple other teachers have mentioned that sort of thing, a formal process might begin to take a look at how can we best help the student.
Kevin has had some trouble staying on task in class, and especially in group work. So to eliminate that, we've changed his seat away from the window, away from other kids he doesn't seem to get along with as well. So his behavior has increased some, but there's still some more that I think he can do. He's not achieving to his best performance yet. Part of that is homework. Homework doesn't seem to come in as regularly as it should. We work with a planner, so he writes his homework down every day, but still the planner gets lost, doesn't bring all his books to class. And tests are another issue in which I've told him he can raise his hand and ask questions for clarifications on some of the questions I have. And it's been helping, but I don't think that he has enough background from the notes he takes to really understand my rewording of the questions.
Marva, have you had any concerns in the past with Kevin not following directions at home or at school, whether it be in junior high or outside during activities, anything like that?
When earlier this year and even in the latter part of middle school, I've noticed that I have to encourage him to do his homework a little more often, and he does seem to not be able to keep up with his things, with his assignments. And I've had several telephone calls from school about his behavior lately, and that's concerned me because he seems to have lost interest in school, and I don't quite know why.
One of the things that school folks have to remember is that the parent is really around that student much more than they are. They may see the kid 1 hour a day, they may see the kid a couple of hours a day, but the parent has probably been with that child for several years before entering school. They see that child many hours during the day. They probably have a great deal more knowledge about what's really going on with that child than those folks in the school. So it's very important that we reach out to the parent and say, from your opinion, from your perspective, what do you think? What do you see? Does the child's behavior reflect this? Does the child seem to be understanding what's going on at school? The parent's perspective can be very, very important for the school, and yet a lot of times parents are reluctant to offer that unless we really seek it out.
Connie, do you have any other academic information or questions that you would like to share?
I do have a couple of questions. First of all, the homework. The quality of his written work, do you notice he has more difficulty completing assignments that ask him to do some writing versus a worksheet that might be fill in the blank or a math assignment?
I've seen some trouble with Kevin's written work. He has trouble forming a complete sentence. His phrases often are fragmented, and often he uses the wrong words in the wrong places. So I think it's hard for him to study because his notes are not very well organized.
Does he have more difficulty with certain kinds of tests? For example, does
In
he
Kevin's case, he's had issues in my class all year, so I've already talked to Kevin's mom a couple of times before then. It was very important to make a relationship with the parent. So before I talk seriously about Kevin's issues, I try to think of 3 positive points I could say about Kevin to establish that relationship, because every kid has something good about him. After I establish those positive points, then maybe I'll bring in some suggestions for how he may improve his behavior, improve his performance, and that seems to really make us a team.
I think I have enough information, and I believe that Kevin certainly is eligible for a case study evaluation. Team?
I agree.
Agreed? Okay. We'll need a full social developmental study, and we'll also do what's called adaptive behaviors. What adaptive behavior measures? It looks at how his performance behaviorally is based on other kids his own age. Just gives a better snapshot of Kevin, okay? So the social worker and psychologist will be completing this component. And these will all involve you. The nurse will get with you, the social worker, the psychologist, the speech and language person when we get to that point. You'll be involved in all of this process, so we make sure to get a very thorough idea of what's going on with Kevin. So if you're in agreement with all the evaluations we talked about, actually, this is a consent form. I'd like you to read this over briefly. It talks about all the domains we just covered, and then if you would sign it, here you give consent and date and signature under step 3 there. Thank you. What this means now is we'll begin this process. You'll receive a copy right now of who attended this meeting and the domains that we talked about, the evaluations we're going to complete, as well as the consent form that you signed. I will also give you at this time a copy of your parent rights. It talks about timelines. It talks about due processes. If at any time you're in disagreement about what we're doing or where we're heading with this, your rights are in there.
One of the things we do with parents, unfortunately, because the law requires so much paperwork, because we have to make sure that the parents have been involved and they've signed this and they've signed that, and sometimes we forget that a parent may just be overwhelmed with that amount of paperwork. A lot of special ed teachers say, well, I hate special education because of all the paperwork I have to do. Well, the parent has to do all of that, and the parent may not even understand what he or she is signing. So it's very important that not only do we get their signatures, but we let parents have a very good understanding of what they're signing, why they're signing it, rather than just throwing papers at them at the end of a meeting and expecting them to sign it. It would probably be very beneficial if the school were to maybe even assign a staff member to really sit down with the parent after a meeting and to see if there are any questions and make sure that all the forms are signed properly.